Breaking news from Buckingham Palace, King Charles has been diagnosed with cancer. His Majesty recently underwent a procedure to address an enlarged prostate, and either before that or after, they discovered that His Majesty does have cancer. Now, while it has been said that it is not prostate cancer, this is obviously hugely worrying for the British monarchy, which has seemed to deal with crisis after crisis, especially since Prince Harry and Meghan Markle married. There's just been so much going on, and we obviously have Catherine still out after her surgical procedure in January, and Prince William is obviously really going to have to step up, as will Queen Camilla, as two of the most senior British royals are not undertaking royal engagements for the foreseeable future. And so what does this mean for the British monarchy? And is Harry and his family going to come and visit Charles? Should they and should they not? We will talk about all of this today. But if you guys haven't been to Royal News Network, my name is Brittany. I provide compelling royal commentary. So if you want more news like this, feel free to hit that subscribe button. I also have a couple links down below to a jewelry line I'm a part of where we're doing a giveaway. So I'll put the link to the giveaway really quick here. And so you can go and see that video and enter into that. Obviously, it is ending today, but we do have obviously this news about Charles. I also have a upcoming trip to Scotland. So all this stuff is down below if you are interested. And obviously as well, this has been a huge shock. Although Charles underwent his procedure, we actually saw him attending church on Sunday. I don't think anybody was necessarily expecting this. Obviously, undergoing a procedure for enlarged prostate could mean prostate cancer. Apparently it is not, but it could be perhaps something that was seen during the either lead up to the procedure itself, or it could be even a secondary symptom of a different cancer. And so obviously this is just a huge, I'm sure, disappointment and concern to the rest of the British monarchy after dealing with Her Majesty's death. Obviously Harry and Meghan just being absolutely troublesome in the corner as well. To have this on top of Catherine's recent hospitalization and surgery is just, I'm sure, just seems like very much a setback and just a series of crises that just don't seem to be going away. So let's go ahead and look at what Buckingham Palace has let us know via their official statement. It says, during the King's recent hospital procedure for benign prostate enlargement, a separate issue of concern was noted. Subsequent diagnostic tests have identified a form of cancer. So obviously this was something that they found during the procedure around it. As you get prepared for something like that, they do a lot of imaging. So that must have been something that popped up. And perhaps as they were doing that initial procedure, they're like, well, you know, we see this problem thing over here and we're gonna go address that and we'll see what it is. So this might have been something Charles knew could happen after his procedure. So obviously I'm sure he was maybe sort of preparing for it, but it's also been a disappointment as well. Also goes on to say, His Majesty has today commenced a schedule of regular treatments, during which time he has been advised by doctors to postpone public-facing duties. Throughout this period, His Majesty will continue to undertake state business and official paperwork as usual. So this tells us that he's started treatment already. So this could be chemo, radiation, there perhaps maybe another surgery in the future. So he is already undergoing treatments for this. So they are expediting it pretty quickly. They might have found out about it last week or earlier. And so this was something that they could not keep silent. I think somebody asked me at some point, well, why did they have to announce it? Obviously they announced it because he's going to be just fine. It's like, no, they're announcing it because he has to undergo procedures. Chemo is obviously very toxic. It's very damaging on your system. It's very difficult, especially given his age being into the mid to late 70s. It's going to hit him harder. I believe he turned 75 this year. And so again, all this is going to be harder on his system. And so it'll be a challenge for him going forward, because regardless of whether or not how easy it is to treat this particular cancer, what he has, chemo is tough on your system. It just is. It's incredibly damaging. It siphons your strength. You'll go through periods. If you've never known somebody who's gone through cancer treatments, I've had some family members who have, you have sort of lulls. You get your treatment, you're really sick and miserable for the first week. Second week, you're better, and then maybe by the third week, you go back in for another treatment. And you feel better for that third week, but then you have to cycle through again. So obviously, he's going to go through a cycle somewhat similar to this, I would anticipate. And because the additional risks to his health, he obviously has decided, and his doctors have encouraged, not to do public-facing engagements, because you don't want to interact with people you don't know that could pass illnesses. Obviously, I think they do things to alleviate that anyways. But when you're in chemo treatments. If you get sick, it can be worse. And obviously as well, your immune system is compromised. And so of course it is always very safe to avoid those sorts of things, but he can still do his obligations of state. I'm sure there'll be some weeks where that's more difficult for him than others, but he's able to do what he needs to continue doing, being king. The king is grateful to his medical team for their swift intervention, which was made possible thanks to his recent hospital procedure. He remains wholly positive about his treatment and looks forward to returning to full public duty as soon as possible. His Majesty has chosen to share his diagnosis to prevent speculation in the hope it may assist public understanding for all those around the world who are affected by cancer. I believe today as well as like Cancer Awareness Day. So it seems rather fitting that he starts his treatment today. And so that is a full statement from Buckingham Palace. I'm sure we will get more details as things become available. But when it comes to cancer, it's just a very scary thing. And so I'm sure even though they haven't told us what type of cancer he has, we will probably learn at some point in the future. And this is something that they're trying to obviously figure out and get a good form of treatment going for him, because sometimes it does take a while to figure out what chemo treatment works best with your particular cancer, what works best with perhaps you yourself. Do you get sicker on this chemo, sicker on that chemo? It all sort of depends. So this is going to be a process, and it might be months. You know, could be upwards of 6 months until maybe we see Charles out and about in public again doing official engagements. And so this is very serious. I know some people I saw on Twitter were talking about how, and even on when I posted on YouTube talking about, oh, he'll be fine, he'll be fine. They caught it early, it's treatable. We really don't know those details. And given Charles's age, not to be an alarmist, but I think it is right to take this seriously and not just dismiss it as, oh, he'll be fine because, you know, perhaps he's king, he has better medical treatments. You just never know what's going on in somebody's internal system, especially when you introduce chemo drugs, which are largely toxic. Yes, they address the cancer, but they are also toxic to your system. And so this is obviously hugely, hugely disappointing to the royal family. I'm sure William and Harry were both told by the king directly about this, and I'm sure they were devastated. Obviously, William as well, especially, and Harry. I know Harry gets a lot of flack, which is well deserved, by the way, and I will go into that. But I think given that they have lost their mother already, the prospect of perhaps losing their father is really scary. And obviously as well, again, cancer is treatable, but even if he goes into remission, the cancer could come back again. All these things are huge possibilities going forward. And again, given his age, is just gonna generally be harder for him to recover. If you're somebody in your 50s and 60s, it's harder for sure. But at least you have, when you're getting into your 70s and 80s, those are tougher years to go through a cancer treatment. And so all the prayers and support out to Charles and the rest of the royals. And so obviously the big question becomes, what are the rest of the royals going to do? Because Catherine is still out, as far as we're aware, until Easter. She will not be a working royal until then. So what are the other royals doing? Obviously we saw Camilla out and about a lot last week. And so she was obviously sort of representing the monarchy and taking the place of Charles and Catherine, who were both still out. And obviously William has been out as well, but he will start doing investitures in Windsor Castle on Wednesday, and he's also going to a gala event on Wednesday as well. And so they are getting back to work, and William will have to shoulder some of the more public-facing duties of the monarch, which I'm sure is something he probably wasn't necessarily expecting to happen quite so quickly. And especially without Catherine being there, I'm sure they were both devastated and feeling so bad in a way, even though you can't help it if you have a health issue. I broke my wrist on vacation in Hawaii. My family was like, why did you do that? I was like, I didn't mean to. It was a total accident. But you sort of feel bad. So I'm sure Catherine, to a certain extent, is feeling bad that she's had her own health issues. And they just happen to coincide at the same point as Charles. And I just find that just incredibly sad, I'm sure, for the Waleses, and trying to do all these different things and probably thinking in the back of their minds, I wonder if we're going to be elevated a lot earlier than we want to be. And I'm sure Catherine and William would deal with that absolutely perfectly. But again, I'm sure they were hoping for some time to get used to their role as the Prince and Princess of Wales, perhaps before being elevated to the next step. And again, this could be depending again on the severity of Charles's stage of cancer and what his treatments are going to be and those sorts of things. He could decide to abdicate at some point if it becomes physically just too difficult for him. Obviously, I'm sure he's going to go through his full round of treatments, see where he is, and continue going from there. But if the cancer doesn't go away, if it metastasizes somewhere else, again, these are all things where Charles may really have to consider what the future looks like. And since Charles has been diagnosed, we have been told that Harry is on his way to the UK. And I agree completely that Harry should visit. I do criticize him for not bringing his children. Prince Harry has caused Charles and the rest of the royals nothing but misery over these last 4 years. The least the guy could do is bring his kids. I'm sure Charles is happy to see Harry, but I'm sure he'd much rather see his grandchildren. I am pretty positive Charles has only seen Lilibet in person one single time at that. Because of course, Harry and Meghan had to come with their kids over the Jubilee week where everybody was super busy. I think they maybe got a little bit of time with Charles and Camilla, maybe. But other than that, their kids didn't get to spend any time with His Majesty or William and Catherine, because again, everybody was super busy going to various engagements connected to the Jubilee. And that was the only time Lilibet has ever been in the United Kingdom. And again, I feel so sorry for Charles that his own grandchildren are being used as leverage against him. Yes, Harry should go, but he should 100% be bringing his children. Why? Because you don't know how much time you have. And Harry, to placate Meghan, has already given up time with his grandfather and his grandmother. Again, Prince Harry was in the United Kingdom when Her Majesty passed away, and he had a free day the day before she died. And they were in Manchester and they were in Dusseldorf. Could they not have obviously made plans to go up to Balmoral in Scotland to visit Her Majesty real quick and then fly home? That he didn't means he got to miss out on some critical moments with his grandmother. And of course, this is happening again. I feel like this is going to happen again, is that Harry is waiting for the apology he wants, the security he wants, or whatever. And Charles, I mean, again, this is just hypothetical. What if Charles passes away and Harry was dragging his feet and not bringing his children because Meghan didn't want him to? They need all this precious security because, you know, they're so important, that his children miss out on ever spending really any memorable time with their grandfather. Sure, I'm sure they do some Skype sessions, but Skype is not being in person. And yes, obviously as well, children bring germs, but I'm sure Charles would be willing to risk it. I'm sure they could take protective measures so that he could see his grandchildren. I just think Harry and Meghan are just so cruel for preventing Charles from seeing his grandchildren. And I think as well, this whole crisis again exemplifies how awful Harry and Meghan are. They are sort of terrible people because all they've done in the last 4 years is try to damage the monarchy, make it more difficult for his father, give their children a prince and princess title without really running it by the monarchy, and just being really pains in everybody's rear ends, to the point where the family probably really doesn't want to see Harry, but I mean, they know he has to come. It's good for him to come. He'd look awful if he didn't come at all. But at the same time, they're like, oh, we have to deal with him again. And he just doesn't seem to care, and he's just difficult and spiteful and everything. And Harry has created that reputation for himself. He went on with the Meghan Markle bandwagon, and we've ended up at this point. And something like this was always going to happen, because what I can't unsee as well is how really in some ways the track between Harry and Meghan and the Duke and Duchess of Windsor sort of fits together. I was actually going to do a video today comparing Meghan with Wallis Simpson because I started reading Traitor King, and I just wanted to go over a couple of the differences I saw in the beginning of that book, because obviously Prince Philip apparently compared Meghan Markle to Wallis Simpson, and I don't think in some ways the comparison is too far off. And you got to think, King George was elevated because Edward decided to leave the throne to marry the woman he loved. And because of that additional stress, King George VI ended up developing lung cancer, and obviously they're probably different cancers that Charles and King George had. But at the same time, you can't help but see the perils as well. The stress that Harry and Meghan brought to the monarchy and the stress that the Duke and Duchess of Windsor brought King George just by abdicating resulted in eventual cancer, because stress just does make your body more vulnerable to sickness and disease, and they do say cancer as well. And so it's not necessarily a huge surprise here that perhaps Charles did develop something. Now, again, I'm not saying Harry caused it, but I don't think the abuse that Harry and Meghan have perpetrated across the monarchy can be totally avoided either in this conversation, because Harry and Meghan have caused nothing but stress, grief, heartache to the rest of the royals since 2020, and really before then as well. They were ignoring advice, they were being aggressive with the media, and just so many different things that put the monarchy in a bad spot before even initiating Mexit. And then we have all the things that have happened after Mexit, the racism allegations against Charles, against Catherine, acting as pseudo-royals in the United States, getting involved in different political things, just so many different things Harry and Meghan have done that have really been damaging to the monarchy. And Harry should recognize that. And that's why, in part, he should bring his children to this. And yes, I'm sure Meghan Markle doesn't want to go, but why can't Harry bring the kids? The kids are young enough where it really won't disrupt their school very much. And the thing is, King George, although he was very sick, he died suddenly. Who's to say that Charles might not die suddenly? And then again, Harry is left missing out on those last moments because it was so much more important to placate his wife and her Hollywood dreams and her aversion to the UK because the media is mean to her. And I just think, again, in reflection on Harry, that's really, really terrible. And once again, I know I did a whole video on this and some people didn't agree, but again, think if Harry had married somebody else and he was in a much better place mentally, physically, and everything, he was still in the UK, how great would it be to have Harry be able to increase his workload alongside William and Harry's wife to do the same instead of Catherine, just for this brief moment. But no, Harry and Meghan are too selfish to care about anybody else but themselves. And Charles right now, I'm sure he's getting the best medical treatment available, and I'm hopeful and pretty sure he will probably make a great recovery. But cancer is something that could recur. It's something that you might struggle with for a lifetime. And so I think this is very, very serious as well. And obviously he is starting treatment right away. I hope he is able to adjust to the chemo quickly. I hope it's able to treat his cancer effectively. We also want Catherine to recover well as well. And I really am excited to hopefully see her for Easter. So guys, thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think of this video, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye.